We are live, and we are here for your listening pleasure or viewing pleasure with the man who is being billed as the most revolutionary thing to come out of London since the Sex Pistols. Well, who's calling him that, Craig? Well, kind of I am, but I guess that's how he's being billed. So, the most radical, on fire, revolutionary apologist this side of Johnny Rotten. Welcome, please, London Theist. Wow! Oh my God! Oh my God!
Thank you, Craig. I've never had an intro like that. That's phenomenal. So thank you very much for having me today and for that amazing intro.
Yeah. So now, apparently, you and Johnny went there during what, the Queen's Jubilee, and you and John met up in London. Am I to believe? And you did
Yeah,
what? You
John.
protested the monarchy and got in bar fights, and hopefully John did me right and beat up some people, right? Did
Yeah, we
honor
went
the
to.
channel by stopping some people as a lager lout. Is John a lager lout? Is that what he was?
No, we had a good time. John come about a month ago now, the Jubilee weekend with your family, and we met up one evening. It was a great evening. We had a few hours to chat. We went to a pub. We went to a restaurant. We just walked around. We've done a lot of walking actually, didn't we? So, and you'd spent the day in the Tower of London walking before that, so you had some energy on you for that holiday.
Very walked out that whole holiday, yeah. And then just before leaving London, I locked myself out of the hotel and was stuck there for like an hour. And it was like a whole ordeal because my family had already gone to sleep, and so I couldn't like call them to like let me in, and it was quite the ordeal.
But
so who were you there with, John? Your sister and parents too, or just your sister?
No, just my sister, her husband, and then her husband's brother. Since my brother-in-law and my sister are sort of like Anglophiles, I guess. They've got like a whole YouTube channel that's about them reacting to like British culture icons and stuff like that. And so they use this as an opportunity to sort of like do more for their YouTube channel. And then they invited me along with them. And I'm like, sure, why not? And it was great because I got to meet up with Dean here. And also Nathan Ormond and his girlfriend V. They live up in Glasgow. So it was really nice.
Yeah, you got all the way up there. That's fun. That's definitely fun.
It was a lot of fun, though. Yeah.
So what did you guys do? You guys went out to the bar. Did you do anything Queen's Jubilee related? Wasn't the Jubilee going on while you were there?
That was the night before, wasn't it? So we met. Well, I can't remember what day we met, but the Jubilee weekend really kicked in the day after. So you was up with your family celebrating then. So we was up there. It was still busy when we were there. A lot of flags were up. It felt like a great atmosphere. We met some Canadians, didn't we, next to our seat in dinner.
That's right.
And they were there for that. So it was busy. London's always busy, but it was exceptionally busy then. And yeah, we just met up, had a nice walk, and went a few bookshops, and started in the Catholic Cathedral, actually, at Westminster, didn't we? That's where we met up. I thought, as John's Catholic, I thought it'd be quite a cool thing to see. And yeah, went to a few bookshops. Yeah, had a great time with it. Personally, for me, it was brilliant because all this few years on Twitter, it's the first person I've met who I've met through Twitter, and it was an American from, even though there's friends I've got in the UK, like Jansen and people like that, I've never met them. I've met John, but all the way from
that's really
America,
amazing.
which is cool.
That's such an amazing, like, I'm actually a bit of an Anglophile myself because my wife is half English, so I'm kind of a paisan. We've gone to England a couple of times. She has aunt and uncle who live in the West Country in Sherborne. So back like,
cool.
Yeah, we went out there twice for about a month each time and stay with them in Dorset County.
Yeah,
it's really fun.
I'll be cool if you come back to London soon, Craig. We'll catch up then. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't know. She's going. I think she's going to Australia. She's also got a relative in Australia, so probably not London this year. But it's potentially, it's doable. I mean, we've done it in the past. We've been there for a pretty decent amount of time, so it could definitely happen.
Brilliant.
So let's start with the. Is there anything else you want to say? Did he conduct himself okay? What did he get in fights?
John was brilliant. John's a great guy, really, really smart man, and just really nice person. It was just great to meet up with him. So yeah.
So cool. Yeah, that's really fun meeting. I don't think I've seen anybody from the Twitter world. We went to Florida and we didn't contact Stephanie because we were only there for like 3 days. We went to Miami and she lives, I think, 10 hours away in Tampa. But
Yeah.
if she had been nearby, she visits nearby to one of her relatives lives in a place called Boca Raton, which is only like 2 hours away. So she would have come hung out with us.
Oh, cool. I
Yeah,
was
that
on
would've been fun.
Stephanie's channel, as we said. Yeah, I was on Stephanie's channel. I've spoke to Stephanie quite a bit on Twitter as well. She seems really nice and cool as well. So that'd be
it'd be really fun to see her in real life.
yeah,
My wife and her that would be really fun seeing them together.
yeah.
And we were going to take her to. We were going to offer her lunch as a bribe at the Trump Doral. We were staying at the Trump Doral. It was like that. So it would have been funny. But she lived 10 hours away, and I didn't know that she sometimes was nearby. So let's talk apologetics. Now, you didn't start out as a Christian, correct? You became one. Is that
Correct? Yeah, yeah.
So tell us what happened. Where were you officially an atheist, or were you just kind of like, I don't care, kind of agnostic, party guy like I was?
Yeah. So England, as you know, and Western Europe, it's very secular, very agnostic, atheist, much more than America is. And America might be drifting that way a little bit in certain states, but Europe, especially Western Europe's been that way for quite a while now. So it's quite natural in your upbringing, like to not have any real touches of religion at all, especially Christianity. I suppose in primary school, you occasionally will see a hymn or something like that because they're supposed to be technically Church of England schools, but that's as far as it gets. Once you get to secondary school, it's basically science, maths, English, subjects like that, drilling sort of materialism. They drill it.
So it's basically like in a way, I don't know if you would know this, but where I grew up in New York, right outside New York City, Westchester County, is kind of similar to that. It's the most secularized place in the country, even more so than California. Like, I was surprised at how much Christianity there was in California, because in New York, there's almost none. I mean, everyone is sort of nominally Christian, but nobody really practices. I mean, I was nominally Catholic, and people go to church at Christmas and Easter as a tradition, but there was no such thing as like a witnessing Christian in my school. There was no thing as an evangelical Christian, like the stuff that happens in the Bible Belt. We were more similar to England than not.
I think so. Yeah. I think New York's definitely similar to like European cities in that sense. But yeah, in secondary school, once you get a little bit older, so it's like 9 to 15, there's literally nothing, because you have an RE, a religious education lesson once a week for an hour, and that's the lesson where all the kids just joke around in. There's no one's paying attention, and even in that lesson, they're focusing on like Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam. You very rarely get a mention of Christianity whatsoever. So
and they trash it when it comes up. Like in New York, I always noticed that everyone had bad things to say. Like someone I know became a Jehovah's Witness, and someone I know joined a weird cult, and I was like, oh, cool, he's finding himself. But then there was a rumor that this girl I knew became a born again Christian. Everyone was freaking out. I was like, I can't believe Quinn Linders became a born again Christian. It's so weird.
That's it. Like, I'm jumping a bit here, but like my boss, we was out like the other week, and they're all secular. We'll get to this a bit later, but where I work now is extremely secular. They're extremely atheistic, and my boss was raised Catholic, but he's extremely atheistic, anti-theistic now. So we don't talk too much religion but we was out for a beer after work one time, and he was just straight away. They brought up religion, and they was talking amongst themselves. They knew I could hear, but they was like, if you're going to be a religious, at least go for like one of the better religions, like Buddhism or Hinduism. And it's just like, just don't be a Christian, whatever you do. That's the attitude that sort of pervades.
Right. Yeah, it's totally the same here. I here it might have something to do with politics.
Yeah.
But this was even back in the 80s and the 90s, and most people associated becoming a Christian with becoming a conservative Republican in America. Right. Kind of for legitimate reasons, sort of, but that's what happened. But in Europe, it's probably, I don't even know why, just because people don't like Christianity, I guess.
It's just been phased out. It's just sort of like over. It had a spell, like I suppose 60s, where it was fighting back against the cultural wars and things like that, and then it just sort of faded away and it become irrelevant. Like the Anglican Church, which I'm part of, just the Church of England, just became a bit of a joke. They got too politically involved. Like if you listen to the archbishops now and talks now, it's always listening to political stuff. Can you still hear me? I can hear some background noise. Is that?
Oh, did the background noise increase or did it go away?
Really increased. Really increased for a sec.
Yeah, if you could maybe mute yourself when you're not talking, Craig, that might like get rid of the background noise and fuzz and clicks and stuff like that.
I'm never not talking, but yeah. Okay.
Okay. Fair enough.
No, it's all good now. I can't hear it anyway. Yeah. So it's just a weird sort of blend of and I think a lot of people just see it as linked to the politics, the church. Yeah, the Church of England, the history of it, traditional Christians, they probably associate it more like there's a big secular movement towards like the LGBT and Pride months and things like that, and Black Lives Matter, and things where they do still associate Christianity with the past, tradition, and that's something they used to do, and that was part of the colonial days, and so I think there is still that there, even So even though totally. There is a weird mix, because in London, like most Christians are like Black, African, Caribbean, or Eastern European, Polish, Romanian, etc. So all the people I knew in school and college who were Christian were from like ethnic minorities. So it's like a strange balance kind of thing going on.
Yeah, well, it's the association more than the reality, because the realities take a while to sink in. When
that's it.
Demographics change.
They're still associating Christianity, like the left, like the secular side of it, with this old colonial sort of white man,
right? Imperial England and like the Empire and Queen Victoria.
That's it, and they're just jumping it all in, not realizing no, Christianity is much more broad. We've got diversity everywhere, and all throughout the Christian history, including early on where it spread from to North Africa, etc., and Middle East where it was birthed. So
what happened? You were mostly a secular, like a
agnostic
party guy?
Agnostic, yeah, and I just grew up like it's a drinking culture in UK. It's like they're known for it, pubs, bars, life, and music and things like that, just going out. So I was very much into that culture, very much not even thinking of God, not even thinking of anything Christianity, anything like that. Just living the life that was there and what was normal. Football, you go out, drink, that's it. You go out on the nightclubs, things like that, and that's just what is expected of you. It wasn't until I was 17 when my younger brother, whose name's Craig as well, he brought a Bible into the home. And now this was strange. Like my parents were like very secular as well. Like, what's going on here?
What on earth are you doing?
Yeah, like that reaction, like something's gone wrong here. Like someone's got hold of him. It's because someone's feeding him, trying to brainwash him with that religion stuff. But then at that spell, it was strange. Like it's like the spirit come over all of us in the household. Like we all got interested over that few months by him just getting the Bible. It's something come over us, like, and my parents included. And I got my own Bible. I just started reading. I was taking interest. Didn't really know what was going on and where to start. Or that's how much I didn't know about Christianity. I didn't know what's going on. You're reading it like 4 Gospels back to back, the same story. It felt like, why have they repeated the same thing 4 times? What is this? Like, how's this following? And it was just learning the basic things like that. And but I found it so appealing, so calming sometimes reading. And we was having some discussions. We found like got on Sky in UK, you got the God TV channel and TVN, stuff like that. And you have American preachers like Creflo Dollar, Joe Osteen, Joyce Meyer, TD Jakes, people like that.
Yeah, they were all on the
they were all on
that. That's similar to the church. I started becoming a Christian at a place called the Malibu Vineyard, and it was those same type of, my wife and I went to a Joyce Meyer meeting once, and I don't know if we went to TD Jakes, but we used to have him on here all the time. I don't think we did because he didn't come out to Cali, but
I really liked TD Jakes because he was motivational as well, and
he's like also just talent wise, he seems to have disappeared in the last 5 or 6 years, but he's a powerful speaker, like just
very much
an orator.
Emotion, ain't it? When he's on stage, he just the whole crowd are connected when you're watching that. It's an amazing experience, it seems. But so that happened. We actually started attending a church. We looked around a bit and we found a church in Buckerstill near where my parents live, and straight away it clicked with us. Like the music, the way that it was an old looking Anglican church, but you go in, it's a bit modern. Nice, newer hymns, etc., newer music, and it just all clicked in. They had a long sermon, which I really appreciated. The priest was brilliant, we just had a great time there. But again, like I said, the culture, the difference between me and my friends telling them this, there was a disconnect. And my friends are like, we're going out at the pub on Friday nights, we're drinking, and I'm trying to tell them about Jesus. Have you read about this? And they're just looking like I'm mad. And then they were coming back with objections about, well, you can't really believe like the Earth's only 6,000 years old, and you can't believe in Adam and Eve and this snake. And there are things I didn't really think of, and I didn't know how to answer. And I was thinking, that's a good point. Let me try and look up that. And I sort of looked up stuff, and I found William Lane Craig a bit at that time, where it helped a bit. But to be honest, my heart wasn't in it fully because of where I was at that age, and I longed to be still out with my friends and doing what I wouldn't do. Even though I was interested in church, and we'd had this touching with God at the time, it wasn't too long, a year or so later, when I actually drifted again fully. And so did my parents kind of as well. It just all went, it just all phased out kind of. So that was the time I was about 18. You jump. Do you want to say something, Craig?
No, I'm just preparing
okay.
preparing to ask. There was static, and then when I muted it, the static went away, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I jumped forward to about, I'll make it brief. I jumped forward to about 7 years ahead when I was about 25, and I'd moved to a new job. I was getting places, but then I was still drinking like loads. I was still not focused. I wasn't. I work in facilities. Like I was just a maintenance officer.
So how would you describe the beginning part? Was this like were you almost a Christian or kind of a Christian but not committed?
Yeah.
Or like...
Joe, what I would have said at 17, I would have said, yeah, I'm a Christian now. But looking back, I wasn't really a Christian. I was almost a Christian, I'd say.
Right.
I'd say that I was introduced into it by what I would look at it as. That was the first time the Holy Spirit come towards.
Right, you would have looked at it as God planted the seeds, and like
that's it.
God was working on you, but you weren't really fully committed to.
I was fighting it. I spent about 7 years fighting. I'd say there was. There was countless times where, if now I look back, if I'd have been a Christian at that point, it would have worked better. But I think I had to go through these things to learn and grow myself. And obviously, I went through a different path than some of us. Some of us they found Christ straight away. They're going to stick to it. But me, there was the intellectual pulling as well, where I didn't have a background of apologetics. I didn't have nothing to go to. Like I said, I sort of found William Lane Craig. I saw him with some debates on YouTube, and I found one was with Christopher Hitchens, and I found that really interesting. But it was all a bit too high level for me at that time anyway. But I thought, wow, he can answer back. Actually, there are good answers here. I should stick with that. Right. So I knew there was some background Christians who could defend the faith really well. But if it's honest,
some of this is also like lifetime. Like you're 22 years old. Like when I became a Christian, I was 29 or 30, and I had just moved out to California. So I'd already was intending spiritually, emotionally, psychologically to start a new life. So it sort of just fit. And I was with my wife, and I was done with like the drinking days. I was already sick of it. So it was like,
Craig, you're so similar to me, because I got to 27. So as we jump forward a bit, like at 25, I met my wife, who's now my wife, and I was still going out drinking and things as well. But I was calming down. I was starting to get my head focused with my life. We started renting together, etc. I moved out, and we was there doing things. And that's when I come across Jordan Peterson, and he was a massive influence on me. His biblical lectures as well. At first, it wasn't biblical lectures.
Was that after he was pretty well known, where he'd already had like 1 million subscribers? Because I discovered him before that, and I was trying to sell him to atheists.
He was pretty well known because it was like YouTube motivational videos. You know, when people take clips and then like stuff. That's when I listened to him once. I thought, oh, and then his book come out pretty soon after, like a year or so after, and that's when I got it straight away. His first book. So around that time. So he was quite big. He was quite big when I first got hold of him, and that really changed my thinking. And then I got into his biblical lectures, and that was it. I was hooked then. But there was times where I always jumped a bit, but I always studied I always liked history. So I was reading up on Roman history, and I got into like Stoicism and things like that. So I was reading Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, and it got me into philosophy that way. So Stoicism was like about a year period where that and Jordan Peterson was enough for me. It was changing me. It was making me better. it was making me get interested in virtue ethics, things like that as well. Stoicism leads to that, but without God in the picture, kind of, you know what I'm saying? But so that was
It's all edifying, positive stuff, like Stoicism, about like being able to emotionally handle, whatever life throws at you.
yeah,
In some ways, it's very similar to certain aspects of Christianity, but like
yeah.
this as philosophy, it's definitely edifying, cool stuff. But this is not. Keep going.
Yeah. No. It was really interesting. I'm still interested in it, but it was led me back to basically I had after about a year or two of that. So I was about 27 now, a few years back. Yeah, my uncle died from alcoholism pretty young, like 50. I was still drinking pretty heavily, still going out a lot. I wasn't the greatest to my wife all the time. At the time, we wasn't wife; it was just girlfriend. But I wasn't the nicest liver. I'm quite calm man, but sometimes I was, getting tempers. Like that, I wasn't best person overall, and I just went for a spell when I think like, what, where's my life heading? What am I doing? Like I've been agnostic for years. I was thinking out of my Christianity phase. You just hit it comes to a head. I'm like 27. I'm just starting. I need to progress in job. I need to progress with my girlfriend. I need to find myself fully. And I started praying deeply. I was like, God, I know you. I felt your presence before. Show yourself to me. Like I need signs. I need to know. If you're true, I will follow you, and I will do what I have to. I'll change whatever I've got to do. Just help me make these changes and show me the way. And I was sometimes in tears. I don't normally cry much, but I was in tears. I just wanted this at that time. It all clicked into gear. And over the few months after that, I had so many dreams, signs, certain songs play. Like what was only between like me and my nan, which was a song we had, and that song would keep playing on the radio every time I get in the car. And it's like that would trigger me straight away. I was constantly having these what I would call religious experiences, and it was constantly like every time I'm praying, something will happen. There was the best example I had. I was at work, which is extremely secular place, like extremely you do not talk about anything but like Christianity there. And I don't know anyone student thing who was a Christian, apart from one person, the head of the library, who was a born again Christian, because I'd heard him talking about it before. He was about 60, but I'd heard him talk about it. Everyone knew he was a born again Christian. So I'm the facilities coordinator. I'd come down to sit where my guys had left. So I'm not normally in this office, but I'm covering until the next guy comes in. And I'm sitting there, and this is one of them days. I was like, I've had a few signs, but I just need to know. Like, I'm just in a bad place. I'm feeling a bit down here. Just give me a sign. So I'm just praying, like kneeling like that. And he walks into the office, puts his hand on his back, said, "Dean, I need your help."
Right.
Now, out of all the people who would have been there at that time, he never comes in that office very rarely. I'm hardly in that office. He's the one person who's a born again Christian, and then. Yeah, I got emotional, and we just had a chat about it, and he told me about his religious experiences and that when his dad was ill, he would become a Christian in his 40s. And it was when his dad was ill that God gave him signs and comfort when he needed it. And we struck up a relationship after that. But that was just one example of what might look like coincidence, but when you're having that back to back.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing I was going to say, I heard you tell that story to Stephanie, and I was there actually live the first time you told it. Something like that, if you're listening from the outside and you're like an atheist or a non-believer, yeah, you could say that that's a coincidence, and it could easily be a coincidence. But when you're on the inside of that experience and you actually go, God, give me a sign, and it literally feels like God answered you in the moment, those experiences, I mean, I've had thousands of experiences like those, and they totally break you. They're like,
They change
I'm
you.
in. I got to do what I got to do to make my life right, because this is real. That's how I responded to stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that for me, Craig, like it's the experiential side. It for me, like you can't explain it fully and I understand that now. The more I'm into like apologetics and that, I can explain this to any atheist online, but they're either laugh at you or just think, well, that's your experience. That's not true overall, though. Why don't we have this? But when I have something that real and that sure to me, and it's that's one of the main times, but it was constant, especially over that period.
I remember when I first became a Christian, there was stuff like that happening all the time. And there were a couple of things that happened like that prior to me moving out to California. Now, when I look back where I was secular, But I remember, like, the one I remember that I told this story in one of my videos. I was flying back to New York because my dad had just passed away, and I get off the airplane in the airport, and my dad only had one set of albums. He had no other albums except Simon and Garfunkel, and he had all their albums. And in the airport, they're playing for some mysterious reason was the song El Condor Pasa by Simon and Garfunkel. And it's like, I'd rather be a sparrow. It seriously almost broke me right there because the lyrics, if you listen to the lyrics of the song, it's kind of about a man like my dad. It was just so I was like, that's something that a non-believer will hear and go, yeah, it's and it could easily be a coincidence that just I was paying attention in my subconscious, but it still feels like something really tangible. Like, so I played that song at the funeral, and so I had hundreds of experiences like that.
And one with mine similar on the song side was from my nan. So my nan's Catholic. She was the only like religious person from my dad's side in the whole family, either side, really. And I just remember she never pushed it on you, but she would always. She would always talk. You knew she was Catholic, and Irish Catholic from Northern Ireland, Belfast, but proud Catholic. But so when we was younger, I done karaoke, and I must have been only about 9 or 10. Like we was all like in Fuerteventura, Spain. Me and the cousins, my nan was there, my dad, everything. And I got up, we was all doing songs in it. My nan loved the song. It's like an old country song, When You Say Nothing at All. I don't know, you might not have heard it. It's been covered by quite a few people like Ronan Keating, people like that. So I sung that, and I remember my nan was just standing right in front of me on the stage, just so happy, looking at me sing this song as a kid, like just joking around karaoke. When she passed away and we went to the funeral, they played that song at the wake. And I just started like crying at the wake, like that was the song between me and her, my nan. And then when I'm going
so specific that
it's so specific, and when then I'm going through the stage when I'm reaching out to God, every time I get in the car, this song would play, and it's not even that popular song. It happened about 3 times over their months, and like this same song. And it was different singers. Like it was being like the Magic Radio would be on, and then Ronan Keating's version will come on. I have the country channel on, and it'll be like country music, and that song will come on. And it just every time it will get me, and it would just be like my sign that
your
God is saying,
sign.
"Look."
And it makes you feel what they call the fear of God. You're like, wow, that's just
fear and trembling. Like I couldn't believe. I was like, this. There's no natural explanation here. There could be like obviously that. Well, when I say that, I don't mean he seemed like obviously the atheist would say, well, you just turned the radio on your car. You luckily got into that time. But it's so unique, and the words of it is when you say nothing at all, and God isn't actually vocalizing, speaking to me, but it just links in kind of in my thinking, and it's something so personal to me that it just it's tied in, and that
the other thing I've talked about too, a lot of times funerals and deaths bring that sort of thing out, but like we had a guy who recently passed away. Our neighbor died really sad. He just kind of fell down one night and died. And we were having a funeral on the beach. And one of the things I talk about in my videos is like atheists always say everyone's becoming a non. I was like, dude, nons believe in God because of experiences like that. Like I was talking to the people on the beach. These are not Christians. These are mostly secular people. And every one of them had a supernatural type of story. Like the guy Wink and his girlfriend who lived next door start telling me about this time where his someone really close to him dies, and he's the only person who ever called him Winkle. And like when the next day he's with Barbara and they're somewhere, and some random person starts calling him Winkle. And so the guy who died was the only person who ever called him that. And they were like, oh my God,
Yeah.
So like things like that happen.
It's common. It's common, and
so common.
And
it could just be you're paying closer attention to that subconscious level. Like if you want to see it in secular terms, it's just not how it's experienced. You experience is like, what the F? Like,
But even in secular terms, like most atheists, like new atheist types, and they wouldn't even accept that, like the subconscious realm and things like that. They're just strictly materialism, mechanistic thinking, and they just get things like that. But they're losing the ground, like your videos have been saying, Craig, because they're getting left behind with all this. And that his name's gone. The one we were talking about, Craig, with the two parts of the brain, left and right hemisphere. Ian
McGilchrist.
Ian McGilchrist on that video I shared with you on Justin Briley's channel. He said, like, he's from the UK. He was like, in the UK, like, if you ask someone if they're religious, like of Christians, etc., they're about 12% of the UK. That's it. Would say it. If you asked people if they think materialism's that it or there's things above, like, they would say 90% of the UK would say no. There's definitely something more than just plain straight scientism.
Because people have these even a lot of atheists do have experience that can't be categorized, that fall under the banner of a spiritual experience or a vaguely religious experience or something strange that sticks with you from the day till the day you die. But people, they bring those maybe it's funerals that brings it out in people. They start talking along those lines because everybody at this funeral, this is only a handful, like 20 people had a story like that was basically supernatural. Like, this story will make every hair on your arm stand up because this was so weird. And they almost always describe it to generically God or something God-like. They don't go, well, it's all material. It's all matter and motion. It's all science. They don't just cut themselves off at the bar right there and end the speculation. They just kind of, they're just not interested in religion per se.
I understand as well. The atheists will try and psychoanalyze me and say, well, you were down at that time, you were struggling, you were looking at your life, and your nan had died and your uncle had died. So you're looking out, you're just desperate, and you're noticing any pattern that. But the thing is that when you're praying for it and the patterns are there, maybe the patterns were already there before, and I wasn't just noticing. Like you said, it's
you're more open to it because of the desperation and the pain.
God could have always been putting the patterns there rightfully for me to get into, but I have been, my mind and my worldly mind, like, was pushing them aside or not noticing. And there's always that aspect of things that God's always knocking at the door, kind of, and that's quite a scriptural passage, like knocking your answered.
Like I can look back on times before I was a Christian that I look back on now and go, well, that was obviously God warning me, and at the time I heeded the warning. Like when I was in drug neighborhoods, and the story I almost told was one time I used to take this guy into the Bronx with me because he'd go into like the crack den, and he'd make the buy, and I wouldn't go in. And one day he comes out. I wasn't buying the crack. I was buying him some crack, and he'd go buy heroin for me. And one day he comes out and he's bleeding in his ear. And he's like, oh my God, drive away, drive. I'm like, what happened? He's like, some guy just said, where's that $50? Started punching him in the head. And that was the last time I ever did it. I was like, wow.
Get out of
If that's not a warning from God, I don't care. That's the scariest. I'm never doing that again. That's the writing on the wall. It's like, it made me so afraid that I was like, that's a clear, maybe that's just your subconscious mind piecing together, keep going down this path and you're dead.
Yes.
But
definitely.
It's the same effect. You take it as God, and it might as well be God because you're warning yourself about what's to come. So,
but ever since, like, on the church side of it, then so me and my wife, she's normally Catholic, and then once she saw me going through these stages, wanted to start attending church anyway together. So we started looking in this area, Greenwich, where I am, for a church. We attended some Catholic church, we attended some Protestant, High Church, Anglican, all various kinds. But then what always stuck with me was the church I attended years ago, which is my parents' side, so East London. And I always liked it there. And so we went there, and straight away we felt at home again. The same priest was there. A funny story is the priest, as I was leaving service when I was 17, and it's always stuck with me. I was leaving with my parents. One of the last times I ever left, and I've told him this, I walked out the room and he was waiting out the church. He winked at me. He didn't wink at no one else. Not my parents, winked at me. And that stuck with me. And then he doesn't remember doing it at the time, but it just was like, it was as if you'll be back. And then since then, that's it. It was like he knew maybe I was drifting. I'm not ready yet, but you'll be back. And since then, he's baptized me. He's married me. It's just like another great little story we've had. And I wouldn't have it any other way, like the journey I've been through. But he was there, and he done the Alpha course with me, which was, I don't know if you've heard of the Alpha course. Like in England, this basically when you first become a Christian, you do you go to like someone's house who's high in the church, and one evening every Wednesday or something for an hour and a half you have dinner, and then you'll go through like a video or like the fundamentals of Christianity, like the Trinity, the Holy Spirit, the incarnation, and you go through all these aspects which new members to the church can learn from. And that was really helpful, and that's quite cool.
So the question I was going to ask you, like, this is the stuff I was going to ask you about with religious experiences, because you're one of the only people I've heard when they're talking about their testimony who's had very similar experiences to me. That I think the experience, like a lot of Christians don't have these type of experiences, or don't have very many of them. I have them to the manifold thousands. I have literally like 3,000 I could go through. But then you hear someone like, let's say, John Steingrad, who talks about the hiddenness of God, right? Now, he was a Christian, very similar to the type of Christian I was. And I'm asking this question out loud. Like, wasn't there a time when they were on the tour bus and the bus broke down and everyone held hands and prayed and something happened? Like, didn't that happen in his life when he was a Christian? Like, that's the part I don't get. Because like every church I attend, I could line up 50 people with testimonies like that easily without even thinking about it. Go like, tell me the last time you felt God was active in your life. And I could easily, without even thinking about it, find 3 people say, well, last week we prayed and this happened. And even friends of mine who weren't Christian, my friend from New York said a priest asked him one time, is there anything you need? And he said, yeah, I really needed a cheap apartment in New York City. And a week later he got it. know, even like secular people have stories like that. So I don't get how he doesn't have them. Like, what's going on there? Did he?
He must have had it, but I don't know his deconvert. I haven't watched. I know you're talking about, and I see him on Twitter, but I haven't seen his main reasons. Is it the problem of evil? Was it lack of experience? Like, do you know, Craig?
The problem of evil is the one he always refers to. Like, he went to Africa, and he had some. I guess he didn't know that people were starving in Africa before he went. But like, no, he saw firsthand, like, firsthand what was going on, where these kids were just without hope, and he was like, "Where's God?" and all this, which is normal. I'm not dissing that. I mean, I've had that experience where I'm like, why is God allowing this when our church fell apart? And if God is sovereign, why this awful ordeal? That's pretty normal. The thing I was questioning was, because he doesn't say, he's just mentioned the hiddenness of God. And I'm thinking, most of the Christians I know don't have hiddenness in their life. That's the only question I was asking out loud. It's more of just a general question. It wasn't specifically referencing him.
Completely. And
so what do you think is different that you had a lot of these experiences and a lot of people don't? Are you more open to it maybe? Are you more...
That's what I would say, because like I said, for that spell of 9 years where I first sort of become a Christian or dabbled with it, there probably was things I was missing. It was my choices that led me away. I know it was. It was what I wanted. I wanted to be with the lads. I wanted to be down the pub. I wanted to be going to the football match. I didn't want to be just like that devout Christian. I didn't want that life fully, and that's me being completely honest. Now, there probably was signs at that time, which if I look back, I can think. But all I know for sure is when I truly opened up at 27, there was manifold signs, and ever since then, there's signs weekly, like at church weekly when we're in confession, like in an Anglican church, will be a public thing. So it'd be like the priest leading the prayers of confession. You repeat what he says, and he absolves you of the sins and things like that. So it's a very communal thing. And you're all in it, and you're all, if you're feeling guilty that week, or if you feel there's something about it that just, the peace of God is unbelievable. That really resonates with me, that period of the service every week. I just find such peace there and renewal at that time.
What's similar about you and me is you actively talk about the peace of God, which I think even a lot of Christians don't experience. Like, to me, that was one of the first things that I felt when I became a Christian was what they call the peace of God. And that's why it took so strongly, because that's what I was looking for. I was really looking for peace of mind more than anything else. Like, I had a pretty dissolute, exciting in some ways, but crazy life prior to me becoming a Christian.
I can imagine. We sing similar on ways like that, definitely, and it's been constant with me. That at one of the main things I'll bring up now, my baptism. During the baptism, the priest is in front, and that you have like the deacons basically in the church behind you. So you have someone just standing over you, praying behind while he's praying over you before you get baptized. And at that period, I was already nervous because it was a packed church. A kid was getting baptized near me, and he brought like the whole family. Like, I was like 50 people in there. So, and in my family, everyone was in his church. It was packed to the rafters, and I was terrified, like doing a little testimony when you do a speech. But then I prayed as I was sitting there because I was one of the last ones up. They're all doing their testimony. I come up, I prayed, and I was calm. The peace of God again. I could speak like it was just me and you talking.
Right.
And then once the priest started praying over me and saying the words I had to say back in it, and then when he's praying and the guys behind me, I had this experience of absolute peace, and the most I've ever felt, and I just wanted to drop back. I just was so relaxed, and I started opening my eyes because I was just like, "Whoa, I'm going to go back. Not this guy. We'll be in the pool. Like this is going to ruin the baptism." And you're thinking that up there on the stage, but it was an unbelievable feeling. I've never felt anything like that. I've felt euphoria at like music concerts, like football concerts, and things like this, and I felt my own other times like in church weekly, but at my baptism there, it was unbelievable. The feeling, the experience I had, you can't explain fully, but I know what I experienced, and that was just an incredible day, incredible
it's
moment.
ineffable. It's impossible to put into words.
It's impossible, and even if you deny it's God, it's something well above and beyond.
Right. Well, that's part of the point I try to make in my videos. I mean, even if this is a stretch for somebody listening to go, yeah, that's definitely God. Okay, fine. But it's something real and tangible that's deeply important, even if it's not technically, if you're not willing to say that's God, you could at least understand how that's deeply meaningful to somebody's life. I mean, it's a voice you want to pay attention to at the very least, right?
Yeah, and it ties into your other arguments like about idealism, which I've been watching a lot of your videos on, and it gets you to the point of where, right, even if it's not God, this is more than your basic materialistic worldview. Right. You've got to get rid of that and become like an atheistic, Platonic atheist, like Eric. It was his name, Eric. You interviewed last week.
Eric Steinhardt. Yeah. I've got videos coming out on that. That was really interesting.
Right,
that was
Craig.
Really interesting.
I watched most of that. I was listening, but I was at work, so I was listening. But there was one point where I know you're a massive rock and roll fan and your music, and he just went at one point. You went silent. He went, just burn that music, rock and roll, burn it. Like you could get rid of all that crap. And I was like, oh God, Craig's gone silent. He's about to end the interview now. Like,
well, he had a couple of that was the anomaly. And then he starts mentioning these weird bands that I'd never heard of and didn't even know what
pagan bands and I
guess I don't know. He had these weird names that I never. It's very hard to throw me. Like my brother-in-law is actually a record producer, like fairly not well known, but he has a somewhat well-known like alt label in Boston, Ace of Hearts record, and we can sit down and talk for like 3 straight hours. Like, because he's like an encyclopedia of music. He can't throw me at all. He can say like the Minutemen, and I'll know what he's talking about. This guy threw me immediately, and it's hard to do. So I was like, what on earth is he talking about? Like,
even at the start, like the religion he was talking about, he was in this Germanic Christian place from like the Midwest of America, and I'd never heard they were painting stuff and you would worship. And I thought, Matt, this does not sound like Christianity, and that. That
was true. And then the part that John and I both thought was funny is like he's just really out of the box, like creative thinker, and then he becomes like Patricia Churchland with philosophy of mind. He starts going like, oh yeah, it's just brain, it's just physical. Like, wait, that seems like a different person, dude. Like, what's going on here?
But yeah, that just didn't make sense with his Platonic worldview. Like you'd think, right, the form's just. He can expand this into like admitting into idealism kind of, or more to reduce that, but then have the forms for mathematics and things. He's got a weird blend, really weird blend, but yeah.
Yeah, he's a brilliant guy, and he's definitely interesting, and he's definitely not your typical athist. And
no, definitely not.
To some degree, that's what I was trying to argue for in my presuppositional videos. That you probably can't argue an atheist to God, but you could certainly argue him to some sort of Platonic atheist like he is. That's in between theism and atheism, because the stuff that he was talking about that I think is based in truth, the Platonic forms, there's no avoiding it. You know, there's some version of the forms that's baked into reality. So
yeah,
I was hoping he was going to give me a strong justification for Platonism while I was interviewing him. I think he's smart enough to sense that I would have used it against atheism.
yeah. You
For
were
Platonism.
pushing it at times, because there was times when you were literally saying to him, well, these atheist Twitter types, they're going to disagree with you. They're going to be.
I was trying to get that out. I was trying, because I think he sensed that if he gave me a strong, because there's got to be a strong justification for Platonism there. There's got to be, because he wouldn't just call himself a Platonist atheist. It's contradictory. He doesn't think it's contradictory, but it is. It's, you know, I believe that there's nothing except transcendent immaterial forms. Okay, well, that's God, dude. You know, so I was trying to push him to give me a justification, like a strong justification for Platonism, but I think he was smart enough to sense that I would have used it against atheists in general. I would have taken the argument and ran with it.
Especially when he got into like morality and things like that. He started talking about the other philosopher. I can't remember his name, the one who debated William Lane Craig before.
Oh, yeah. Well, John will know. Wicklenberg.
Yeah, he started talking about, he deflected it from himself. He said, well, he has that morality, Platonic. But that makes sense. Like, if you're going to do the Platonic thing, use it for morality as well, and like forms of, that and up to the good. But he didn't want to, engage fully in that, maybe because,
Yeah, and then he said, you know, I'm going to make a video about this where I analyze it, but he said, he wants to have a conversation with Graham Oppie, because they agree on a lot of things. Well, fundamentally, they disagree on a big thing. And that the part where they disagree, I side with Eric Reinhardt. And Oppie, as far as I know, is more of a reductionist, materialist, matter and motion guy.
Yeah.
So I would love to watch that conversation, because, you know,
he described Oppie as like negative theology, didn't he? Which is quite a good term. Like,
yeah, he definitely has some really intelligent insights.
Yeah,
you know, he was really sharp. Like, he's first rate brain.
Yeah,
but he's, you know, more interesting than your typical atheist, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you also listen to some of the idealism stuff. You watched the Bernardo Kastrup interview, I take it.
Yeah. I'm really new into this. So basically, it's through you and Inspiring Philosophy that I got into any sort of idealism and just knowledge on digital physics itself. So I'm just like introductory level, but I'm learning loads, and I see how it leads. Yeah, I don't see I couldn't answer back to what you raise in your videos. Like, it seems convincing to me. So it's definitely
it's cool.
a strong argument.
Bernardo, I discovered, I think he was on T Jump's channel originally, and I just tuned in. I watched a lot of his videos, and I was like, who's this guy? This is pretty interesting. And then I started, you know, becoming influenced by him, because I think he's onto, I think there's a solid empirical justification there for idealism, a form of idealism that I think can be successfully argued for and potentially proven. And as far as I'm concerned, that's, you know, it's not God. Like Bernardo Kastrup says, he's not a Christian. I was surprised at how, when in the video, I was kind of surprised at how open he seemed to Christianity when I was talking to him. You know, like he didn't distinguish that much between Christianity and idealism, whereas
because he's not that far away, is he? He's not saying it, but you can tell he's just not that far away.
Right. Well, that's why I latched onto idealism originally, because I saw the implications immediately. You know, you're talking about a universal mind or universal consciousness, and the reason he says it's not God is he sees it has no intentionality towards us. It doesn't love us. It doesn't give you and I specific signs and say, here's your dad's song from Simon and Garfunkel when you're heading towards his funeral. Like, you know, doesn't do that. But he would probably recognize that as part of, you know, a universal unconscious thing. Like when I heard the thing I was telling you where I was on the plane, and he'd probably recognize your thing as a universal consciousness thing, right? I mean, he wouldn't discard it. He'd probably say it was a sign and say it was what we thought it was, but he wouldn't necessarily ascribe it to a God, right? He'd ascribe it to sort of universal consciousness. Something like that, right? That's my guess.
Definitely. definitely.
So that's cool. So you started watching. Who'd you start watching? You started watching Capturing Christianity and Inspiring Philosophy and.
Yeah. I've been like for years. I've been watching them guys anyway. So when I first become a Christian baptized, and I was watching YouTube just to brush up on apologetics. I started with William Lane Craig, and then I found Capturing Christianity, one of the first ones. And then I joined Twitter, and I just thought I'll just start answering back. Like I just saw there was a lot of atheists on there, like constantly attacking Capturing Christianity people, and I thought, well, let me jump in here. And the start of my Twitter, to be honest, was just to get involved and just try and push back and see and try and respond to see what arguments I can respond to, get people thinking. And I've progressed since then. I'm not really on Twitter to argue at all. I'm just there to learn now, really. I just post some tweets occasionally, but most of the time I'm just watching back and forth from like the philosophical atheists, learning from them and learning mostly from the Christian side of things as well. Like the top guys learning about Ed Fazer. I love his work, and Josh Rasmussen, people like that. So right. I'm on there to follow their tweets and back and forths and that. And obviously, I'm in some private groups with you, Craig, and other people as well, which I really enjoy.
Right. Ron's group.
Ron, yeah.
It's
Ron's
officially
brilliant.
Ron's group, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. Ron made it. Yeah. Ron's brilliant. I've actually chatted to Ron twice on his channel before.
Right.
And yeah,
he's trying to promote. He's trying to use me to promote his channel as we speak. He had those attached to you, you performing "God Save the Queen." I posted that video of you performing "God Save the Queen" at the Queen's Jubilee.
He was taking your thunder. That was it, man.
Yeah, actually, everyone go watch. If you want to follow up, go watch Ron's Revelation Room. Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Go watch, he's here.
It's a twofer, right? You're on there twice.
That's cool. I was on there twice. So I think I was one of these first guests, and then we redone it again. I'd love to go back on again because me and Ron are so similar thinkers in ways as well. We were both heavily influenced by N.T. Wright, Inspiring Philosophy as well. John Walton, we get into like a lot of stuff about John Walton and like ancient Near Eastern texts and how to square like young Earth creationism versus that sort of stuff.
So did you officially start out as a young Earth creationist? Is that?
No. It's not really that big in the UK, to be honest. Some Christians probably are, but I suppose when I was like 17 and people were pushing back on me, like my friends, like I mentioned first about Adam and Eve and Noah and things like that, I just didn't know what to say.
Oh,
but
okay.
I never sort of thought, well, there's this worldwide flood and all the animals come under. I thought there's got to be more. There's got to be more nuance than that. There's got to be. It's got to be more in depth. If it is God's word, it's not just going to be a plain scientific Western reading of bit by bit like that. We got to look. I already knew to look at things in their context, kind of.
Right.
And that's what when I become a Christian again, like properly at 27, I got into people like N.T. Wright, who led me into John Walton, Heiser, things like that. But especially Walton's because Heiser gets so much into supernatural, which is good. But to me, and like coming from such a secular background, even I'm talking about religious experiences, it's easier to focus on something like straightforward, like Walton will just give it to you. I don't know. Have you ever read any John Walton?
I have not. I know the name.
He does like.
He was reconciling Old Testament violence scriptures. That's how I've always associated with him. I don't know if that's accurate, but
I don't know if so much of that he might do that, but he was more like he goes through Genesis and like Adam and Eve, the lost world of Genesis, lost world of like Adam and Eve, lost world of like Noah, and he goes through these big things and puts them into the concept, the cosmology of the ancient Near East of the day.
Right. Yeah. No. I
super interesting.
I have I have this stuff that I do, and I only have a limited amount of time, and there's still so many like physics things that I have lined up to watch, and so I on not even in the docket are the Old Testament and things like that aren't even on the table right now because
but that's the thing. That's what I said this on Twitter before. I said like being a Christian is like a never-ending. So you could read a book every single day, a new book every day from a library, and you're going to keep learning, keep going, because there's like your idealism type and things, and you've got contingency arguments you could read for days, like Ed Fazer's stuff or Josh Rasmussen's versions or consciousness. Right. You've got so many different avenues you can go down, and I'm just trying to keep up and read as much as I can. But
and that's not even talking about the new guy that I found, Johannes Ratz. Well,
apparently I saw your video talking about him. Yeah, that was a good video you done last week. I'd never heard of him either.
He's got like 50 videos that I've never seen that are really relevant. Actually, a lot of good stuff in there, like digital physics arguments and that whole
Yeah.
is the universe a simulation? And I just found out about like the holographic principle, didn't even know about
Yeah.
till recently. So,
And he
and
inspired inspiring philosophy, didn't he?
yes, he was. As far as I know, he's the original inspiration behind inspiring philosophy's digital physics arguments,
Yeah.
and he's the his stuff is really good. It's a lot harder to digest than inspiring philosophies because some of it is you can't, like, inspiring philosophy is really good at making videos that we can follow and understand even on high level,
Yeah.
processing stuff down. Like he's got a talent for it, actually. Like his physics videos are pretty easy to understand. I don't think anybody gets lost watching them,
Yeah.
as far as I can tell.
Definitely. Like, but yeah, but what I was saying on Twitter now, I've got to a stage where I've had this experience, like these experiences constantly. I'm so confident in my faith that you can dabble in like the natural theology side and see the atheist view, like the contingency argument. You could see, well, or the Kalam. Kalam I used to be really big on, but you could see actually there's these answers to this. This could work this way, or the moral argument, how it was originally put. And I just sort of dabble in like the whole natural theology. And even though I find the contingency argument, the way Ed Fazer puts it, like really persuasive, and I wouldn't know how to answer that, I wouldn't be like, it doesn't threaten my faith so much. Like, if Kalam fails, that's not the end of the world for me, kind of, where it could be for other Christians. And I don't think you should base your whole. You should know Christ, and you should be in a relationship with God, and have
Right.
these spiritual
Absolutely.
relationships. Be part of a church, and that's how you grow as a Christian. In my apologetic mind, the theology is brilliant, and I feel it's true. A lot of the arguments, 100%, like your idealism stuff, contingency arguments, I think they're true. But religious experience arguments are strong overall, I find, especially because through my experiences anyway.
Well, I think religious experience should be sought out for its own sake. It's, you want to try to be intimate with God. If there's actually a God, you want to know him, and the way to do that is through prayer. Pray without ceasing and really trying to connect. And
Yeah.
like they say, pray. I will be found of you when you pray for me when you search for me with all of your heart. And
Yeah.
I heard an atheist once say, talk about confirmation bias. No, it's talking about, that's exactly the wrong thing. It's really, really, really trying desperately to, like, what you went through. And maybe you do need to be broken in a period of like crisis in your life, of desperation, in order to instigate that in somebody.
Yeah.
But you went through a period where you did what we call crying out to God, where you
Yeah.
really, really desperately wanted to hear from God, or you were going to collapse. That's when stuff happens, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And then it keeps happening, because even since then, like I said, in church every week you get this sort of peace of God you find. So yeah, it's
well, if churches knew what they were doing, they could be a lot more powerfully experientially, so that even if an atheist didn't necessarily believe, like, people have come to my church in California who didn't believe, like my sister at the time, and she broke down crying on New Year's Eve, and she had a really powerful experience. She didn't go home going, that was Jesus, sign me up. I don't know how she looks back on it and reconciles it to herself, but you don't need that. If the church is functioning properly, that powerful, peaceful experience should be part and parcel of it. And it's very rare. It's very hard to find.
Yeah.
It's not
absolutely.
common. It's rare. That's why there's so many atheists, and you can't just say, well, go to church, because that church is almost routinely going to suck and not be able to do that, to not be able to have a peaceful,
an example, Craig, like when I was with John in London, he was talking about one of John's friends who he knows on Twitter. He used to be a Christian, but now he's an atheist. He's more spooky, John would say. Like he's more into more like consciousness things like that. Now he's an atheist than he was a couple of years ago when he was a Christian. He was like materialist, physicalist Christian, like no experience like that. But now he's an atheist. He's getting, so something's gone wrong there. Like the church needs to be, like you said, getting these experiences so it don't have to be when people are broken.
Right. Well, at the very least, like, someone can come to a church and they could be an atheist, walk into the church, but still have an experience that they found inspiring and peaceful, and they walked away feeling better about life and better about God in general. They could still walk away with a really peaceful, positive experience And that just doesn't happen all that frequently. Like
Yeah.
the religious trauma thing that the atheists talk about, I buy that to a certain extent because some of those churches were wackadoodle and traumatized people, you know? I find that eminently plausible when you hear people talking about, you know, this is what my church did. They basically terrorized me with thoughts of damnation for stupid crap, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
should we get John to ask us questions? I think we're at the hour point.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah, I
think,
know
Johnny?
it's like what 12 o'clock for you, Dean. So sorry
Yeah.
about that for keeping you up.
No, that's fine. That's no problem. I've really, yeah.
All
It's
right.
fun.
Yeah, we actually do have a couple questions from Baxter Williams. Let me see. All right. Question for Dean. London, would you say an atheist where wait, would you say an atheism where the atheist hasn't had any
Hasn't had
personal
any.
religious experiences is understandable? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'd say it's rational. I'm not someone who says it's irrational to be an atheist. That's nothing. Like I see atheism quite rational. But like most of my friends are atheists. Like I've grown up around them. They're smart, much smarter than me. Some of these people. It's not a rational side of it. It's they could certainly be an atheist, and that's respected worldview in ways. I had just on my side, that's something I could wrestle with, like the divine hiddenness side of God. Did like what McCrae touched on a bit earlier, and why people do fall away, or why people. Baxter, I think, was a Christian himself originally. Why did he have these experiences? That would have been interesting. Did he have them, and then he's just fallen away since, or did he never have anything like that?
Right.
And yeah, I can't judge. I don't want to ever sit there and judge and psychoanalyze too much to say an atheist hasn't prayed hard enough or hasn't been at the point where I was at, because I don't know fully, and that's not my domain. But I know from my experience why I am a Christian, and I can fully justify it in that belief, and that's how I would say. I don't know stuff.
I would add to that I would not expect somebody outside of a religious experience to be anything other than an agnostic or an atheist. Like, to me, the thing that puts you over the finish line, that really gets you to believe, is the religious experience. Like, I wouldn't expect, you know, somebody who hasn't had something that they can look back and go, that really felt to me like the touch of God, to necessarily be anything other than agnostic. I agree.
I agree with that, Craig. What about people like Ed Fazer, who says like he became a Christian, a Catholic, through the Aristotelian like arguments for God? Like
I believe that, but I don't see how that. I mean, I believe that, and I look at the arguments, but I don't see how they could turn somebody. Like, I totally understand how a religious experience can be convincing, and then you're in, because that's what happened with me. You know, I had a powerful religious experience that was really hard to reconcile any other way than that was probably God. And that wasn't it. I'd become a Christian that night, but I started seeking God after that, and then I had thousands of them. You know, so I believe that's how he became a Christian. I just don't get that as much as what you said, crying out to God the old-fashioned way. I'm hurting and I cry out to God, and wait a minute, that really seemed like that was you answering me. And like, then from that point forward, you know, that's religion as far as I'm concerned. That's the ticket. That's the one.
Yeah.
Speaking of, we actually have another question related to that from Baxter. Craig, what if you were religious and really tried to reach out to God and got nothing but silence? Is that evidence for an atheist worldview? That is what I got.
Well, most atheists will say that, and I would say, you know, it's you are, if you really tried and you really think you satisfied yourself and you really cried out from the depth of your being and you got nothing, then yeah, you're justified to be an atheist. I cried out from the depth of my being, and so did London, and found what we were looking for, and that's the promise in the Bible. You know, seek and you will find. A lot of times the atheists who I talked to said, I tried that 10 years ago. Okay, that's fine. That was 10 years ago. Try present tense and see what happens. You know, I saw a couple of people have done that. Nathan did a little thing where he tried a little bit, and, you know, it seemed like performative a little bit. Like, the only thing I would have critiqued with him is really try, like, cry out. Don't say what you think a Christian should say. Say what you actually want to say, you know, whatever that may be. It could be like a litany of resentments, you know, could be anger, could be whatever the genuine emotion is there. But yeah, if you legitimately think you cried out to God and you legitimately think God was silenced, then yes, you are rationally justified to not believe in God. But I think that you will find if you legitimately seek. That's how I found. So
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say probably for a lot of people, the problem of divine hiddenness is something that's more, I guess, obvious to them. I guess like there's a certain aspect where like you can like know firsthand that like God hasn't reached out to you, rather than like being able to sort of like weigh out all the amounts of evils that take place in the world compared to all the pleasures that take place in the world or something like that. So yeah, I can definitely see how, and we've even seen like through a lot of these sorts of conversations how a lot of the atheists, they sort of brought up this sort of dark night of the soul sort where they reached out to God or very much wanting to have that connection. Like, God, I don't even know if you exist. If you do exist, like, let me know about it. And then got nothing, which does tend to happen. And I think that, like, yeah, it's a serious problem. And I think that theodicies should probably be more focused on them, especially just given the fact that probably for a lot of people currently, that's what's most motivating their atheism,
well,
at least on a very personal level.
What happened with you, John? Because when you first started doing this, you weren't a Catholic. Something spoke to you to get you to become more committed. Mm-hmm. Was it what? You can answer this casually, what do you think it was? Do you think it was a combination of something emotional and some sort of yearning or something, right?
Sure, yeah, definitely. And like even before I was a Catholic, I've had like a couple experiences that was just sort of like a sense of comfort, especially at a point in my life where I was like really wrestling and questioning and suffering from like certain bouts of like overwhelming sort of or not anxiety, but like just sort of a general depressive sadness. And so yeah, I've had some experiences that you could call religious, but you could also be able to interpret them from like sort of naturalistic sort of lenses. And I think that, at least for me, probably a strong drive for me in moving towards the Catholic Church was, well, one, wanting to develop a closer connection to the church that Christ established, like from like his presence on earth to the current day. And so that's what sort of led me to sort of like consider Eastern Orthodoxy and Catholicism. And then the other aspect was like I came to a sort of newfound appreciation of the sociological sort of benefits of religion, where I was like, wow, there's an actual utility like for the human person to be part of a religion, which is really funny because like I mostly found out about this through secular thinkers such as like people like David Sloan Wilson, who's like an evolutionary biologist who like makes a case. Yeah, exactly. They're almost like making a case for religion despite them being atheists and doing so from a secular lens. And so it at least got me to open up the door to consider these things. And then, yeah, just I had a sort of yearning to be more, I guess, formal in my relationship with God. And so that's what led me to enter into communion with the Catholic Church.
Right. And that's kind of similar to the question London Theist just asked me about Edward Fazer. I mean, you could come to belief in God through different avenues. And I don't necessarily have a preference. I just talk about the ones that I came to. The ones that is why I became a Christian. Like the Edward Fazer, if the Aristotelian arguments make sense to you, go for it. Become a believer through argumentation. I'm totally cool with that. It's just I stick to like, well, how did I become a Christian, and how do explaining through my lens. You know what I mean? But yeah.
All right, so we've gone for about an hour and 10 minutes. You want to sort of close it off here?
It's up to you.
I can do another 10 minutes or so if you want. If there's any other questions, or I'm enjoying it. So
you can do 10 more minutes. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I really appreciated like having a pint with you and then having dinner afterwards, because like I feel like we were like talking nonstop, and it was like it's something I really love about finding people that are as interested in like theology and philosophy as me.
It was quite cool as well, because before you had your debate with Emerson recently, and you'd already filled me in what you was going to say, kind of, because I knew I was one of the only people I thought, oh, John's going to get him here. I knew it was coming, and stuff you've been working on, which I read that paper you wrote on the
Thanks.
participation. I thought that was really cool. You touched on it briefly at the pub and then reading it. It's really interesting take on that. So, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. It's funny. I was speaking of John Steingart. I sort of brought up my sort of response to the problem of divine hiddenness to him, and he was saying how he appreciated my debate and he finds it a sort of interesting theodicy. So I'm definitely happy with the sort of feedback I've gotten both from critical atheists and also sort of appreciative atheists.
And the philosopher from Goff.
Philip Goff. Yeah,
he was really into it, and he's really interesting. I heard him talking about fine tuning on capturing Christianities, and he's big for that, ain't he? But he's got a really unique view, isn't he? It's fine tuning is such strong evidence, but then also the evil is such strong evidence. So we have to adapt what God is and what consciousness is. Super interesting guy.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to his recent book because he's actually interacting with this sort of argument from psychophysical harmony. He brought it up in a recent podcast where he was sort of pushing the other atheists, okay, well, how do we explain how there's this sort of very fitting sort of connection between our experiences and the actual world? And I don't know, the atheists had sort of weak responses, but I'm definitely looking forward to see how he, as an atheist, will be able to respond to it. And I don't know if he would consider himself exactly an atheist because I think he thinks it's most plausible to view the universe itself as a sort of omnibenevolent, very powerful being, but it's just a material being, so it's not quite theism. It's more like pantheism of some sort, maybe.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, it's there. Did you watch that debate with him and Bernardo Castro? Because it was I see them as more along the similar line, but they seem to find a lot of disagreement.
Yeah. Yeah, it might be a little bit of Castro's just desire to sort of poke people and stuff like that. But yeah, I really appreciate both of their sort of pictures of the world and able to sort of incorporate a lot of the sort of theistic arguments in still a sort of naturalistic lens. So it's very cool at least to see that there's almost a progression in the development of naturalism, and similarly people with Josh Rasmussen who's trying to develop theism, and there might be a sort of mutual bridge that could be met somewhere.
Yeah, well, I think there's a someone, that's why I keep talking about people like John Vervaeke. Is, as far as I'm concerned, he's on that middle territory. He calls himself an agnostic and an atheist, but if you listen to him, especially when he's talking to someone like who's the Greek Orthodox guy, Jonathan Pajot.
Oh yeah.
You tell me which one's a Christian when they're talking. You can't tell which one's the spiritual guy and which one's the agnostic. You have no idea. You can't, because they're very much on our page, and they just arrived at it through a completely different route.
Yeah. Talking of Jonathan Pajot, he was just on YouTube actually yesterday. I was really laughing. Jordan Peterson had a recent clip with him, and he was saying years ago he brought him to an Orthodox church, and he said Jordan Peterson couldn't handle it. He said, and then it went a couple of weeks ago. You came into a new one. You was really enjoying it. He said, yeah, it's because it's the only place that's sane. The rest of the world is insane. He said, I find peace in this church now. Or something. Oh, it's really cool.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question for you, Dean. If you could devote an entire year to studying something, or just something that you have a passing interest in, and you want to sort of learn more about this subject, what do you have sort of that you would sort of jump towards? What are you interested in?
I love history, so I think and because of my theology, and I'd like to tie into church fathers, something really dive deep into the history of Christianity and the early church especially. And I'm fascinated in when I first become on Twitter, I was fascinated with N.T. Wright's book and arguments for the resurrection. I was just onto that constantly. I've called off a little bit because I go through different spells of reading stuff, but history is my love, and so is theology. So I would go in that direction. On that note, did you guys see the debate the other day? It was brilliant. Young lad on Testify, Bram Rawlins versus Matthew Harkey. Matthew Harkey is that the atheist, really smart atheist who knows everything that he thinks Jesus is a failed apocalyptic preacher from first century, and he's arguing that against this kid called Bram Rawlins, and this kid was just immense. Honestly, this debate was brilliant. Both guys were amazing. Testify was hosting it, but it's really worth a check out because there's really good answers. I'd never answers back. This Bram guy, yeah, it's just worth a check. Like,
cool, I'll check it out.
Yeah, I really like Testify's channel as of
Yeah.
late. But yeah, I've been meaning to watch that. So yeah, glad to hear it. It's got.
Had you heard of him before? Had you heard of Bram?
No, I hadn't.
No, neither had I. But he's he's crazy smart. Like he's just got out all these Dow Allison books, and he got out all these NT Wright books, and he's got a shelf like yours, John. He's just all of New Testament, and he's just like, yeah, there's this, and Matthew's a beast as well. And I've known him for a while on Twitter, but
yeah. That's good though that like we have young Christians sort of like responding to that argument, because like if you were to sort of like take the minimal facts of like things that most scholars agree on, Jesus as a failed apocalyptic preacher is probably going to be one of those minimal facts, and so like there needs to be a strong response to that problem.
Yeah, and the C.S. Lewis version, well, Jesus just got things wrong, and his human form. I've never been satisfied with that, and Bram was saying that just can't really work like Orthodox Christianity, and he was showing and he was breaking down each saying of Jesus that would apply to transfiguration, that would apply to this, that. So it's really good, and it's worth checking out.
I was gonna say,
or
if
successful, or a successful apocalyptic preacher, and the apocalypse hasn't happened yet. It's coming.
Yeah,
we can feel it coming.
It will.
Well, I think the problem though is like Jesus says, like within a
My
generation. Life. So yeah, it's like maybe there's somebody that's still alive that is maybe what is it? There's like this fictional story about Lazarus, because Lazarus already died. He's not going to die again, so he's just going to like continue to exist. So maybe that's what is meant by like within one generation. No, I was going to say if you wanted to like really dive deep into like the early church fathers, you're probably going to need 10 years. So I don't know if 1 year is really going to cut it.
That could start me off, but I've already definitely.
Yeah. How about you, Craig? I'm interested. Like, if you could have like a whole year to devote to like some particular topic, what would you want to sort of like devote that time towards?
Well, I mean, historically, things I became like a mini expert on World War I and World War II. Back in the day, going back years now, but back in the day, I could give you like almost a day-to-day account of World War I. Like those are the things that I've read just for the kicks. I haven't done it in a long time. Nowadays, how would I answer that question? I don't know. It's tough to say these days because new things pop up every week. Like, I would probably just devote more time to what I'm doing right now. I just free up a lot more time. Like the things that I'm listening to now, I'm really engaged with. Like I've just started listening to what's his face? The Holographic Principle with
Leonard Susskind. Yeah.
And then like that, I thought that whole thing is fascinating. Like the stuff I'm listening to now, I'm really interested and engaged with. So I'd probably just free up more time and maybe throw some of the things like the names he threw out that I put on the back burner, like John Walton and like those sort of like NT Wright I haven't listened to in a long time. I used to listen to him a lot. There's a lot of the more traditional stuff I put on the back burner. So maybe I'd put that more in the foreground if I had more free time. Because it's a time issue now. Like I only have about an hour and a half extra a day to listen to YouTube videos, maybe 2 hours before I go to bed at night. So I have like 50 to 100 things. I started out watch later. Now there's 150 watch laters. Now I have to do tonight, 200 of those. Now I have the real to do tonight, which is like 150. And now I have new to do tonight, 50. And that one's starting to get too clogged up because I always, like I popped on the Leonard Susskind. I was like, okay, I need to know more about this. So I looked up all the holographics and and now I found Jonathan Ratz's channel or Johann's. So there's always stuff every day. There's like 3 or 4 new things that pop up in my mentions. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is a whole new thing.
Yeah.
Nice.
And you, John?
I I don't know. I'm like currently really interested in philosophy of mind. Like I'd like to sort of like map out all the possible sort of like views in philosophy of mind with like panpsychism, idealism, identity theory, hylomorphic dualism, substance dualism, reductive physicalism, eliminativism, and just sort of like really sort of map out where they can overlap. Like I think that like panpsychism and idealism technically overlap, and
Yeah, they definitely overlap.
yeah.
Definitely.
And then I'd want to like really sort of map out in my head where they sort of characterize and what their sort of main claim to fame is and what it would require for them to be false. So that would be a really interesting sort of like thing I wanted to devote my time towards. And I'm also sort of like I also at some point want to devote more time into like considering the normative theories, like between virtue ethics or deontology or like natural law theory and consequentialism, all of that, because I feel like that's another sort of area that's very murky, where it's not like each of these things are like clearly distinct from each other. And I want to see that, like, okay, where is it that these things definitely diverge from each other, and where is it that they can sort of overlap? And I want to see which is sort of like the best sort of normative theory view, and maybe it's a pluralist sort of view, but yeah, that would be two areas. And if I could have 2 years, I'd probably first do consciousness and then normative ethics.
Cool.
Brilliant. Interesting stuff.
So cool. So shall we wrap her up?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure.
So thank you both. Thank you, Craig, especially for having me on your channel. It's been a privilege. This has been a brilliant chat. I really enjoyed it. I hope everyone else did. But and John, it was great seeing you again.
Good to see you too, Dean. Yeah.
Yeah. So you heard it here live, kids. The most revolutionary religious figure since Johnny Rotten was on our channel, and he lived to tell the tale. So if he's going to leave you with anything, it's seek the Lord with all your heart. Seek and you will find. Religious experiences, cultivate them, know them, love them, have them. And then you will become like London Theist. You will be a humble man of meek and humble, but powerful man of God. So there you have it, kids. With that, we will end the broadcast.